Sales Crunch. Learn more, earn more.
In the meeting room, we finished the small talk, and the client says, "All right, bring it on. I'm ready to listen. Start with the pitch." People often start with a flood of information. It's actually a lot about themselves. They talk about the history of the company, the background of the company. Spend a lot of time talking about yourself. The most important part of the sales presentation is actually to get a dialogue, to understand what the client really wants, to get the opportunity to formulate the client's issues, and actually filling the time you have is facts about yourself, facts that maybe could be gotten from other sources, is a waste of the meeting's time, of the opportunity. What are sort of the things that you can cut? Obviously, things that the client already agrees with. If he's in agreement about that something is a big issue, it's a waste of the time in the slide to start spending a lot of time in repeating stuff that the client already knows. On the other hand, try to find out what the real issues are. And at McKinsey, I've been sitting on RFP processes on the other end of the table. And we were actually very, very transparent in our assessment of potential suppliers. They would discuss with us what do you think, and we would actually give them pretty much our selection criteria. It's something to take into account in your presentation, that you actually need to address your weaknesses, not by saying our product is horrible and we're really, really bad. But if you do the other extreme, just talk about your strengths and don't talk about that elephant in the room, you'll have had a great sales meeting, a smooth presentation, but at the end, you're 100% sure that you will not close the sales deal. So think about different audiences you give your presentation to, in particular in big companies. You are often presenting actually to the person who's probably really on board, who likes your product, who invites you to the sales meeting. So that's not the problem. The problem are other people in the organization, and that might not necessarily be in that presentation room. So basically your sales presentation becomes a coaching presentation to that one advocate that you have in the company to enable him or her to tell your story to someone else when you're not in the room. Think about that. The secret of sales is often that to convince someone of the problem is even a much more powerful way than sort of pitching the solution. If you show that you really understand the client's issues completely, he or she will more easily accept that you have the right solution to cover it. So think about that in balancing your presentation. In pitching that problem does not always have to be in figures or data or bullet points. It can go also in images and visuals. In this example, for example, this showing the lineup of people that are waiting to buy lottery tickets might just help you sell your mobile lottery ticket solution to a large mobile phone operator. People like to follow the crowd. So whenever you pitch to a large company, they are always very interested in your experience in dealing with other companies, and talk about that. Whenever people use case examples in sales presentations, they're often very, very generic, using some of the same buzzwords that we saw in the case of the curse of knowledge example. In a sense, try to be very, very specific, and try to be very, very interesting in a language that people can understand, to make really, really good case examples where people can learn something from, rather than some empty statements that people have all heard before. Think about the momentum as you go through your sales pitch. And often I advise against doing live demos inside a sales presentation, particularly when you have like half an hour, 45 minutes to pitch your solution. It's very high risk. Things can go wrong, so the internet connection might not work or something else, or you need to look around and in the application and sort of pop the momentum or the energy of the presentation. It's much better to do the demo in a specific demo setting where you say, well, now we're going to go and play around with the product, but not when you're coming in to sort of present your company for the very first time. People always sort of quantify benefits and give sort of big numbers. We provide an ROI of 20%, or we deliver millions and millions of cost savings. The client has heard it before, and the big numbers probably don't say that much. The really interesting bit is the logic behind these numbers. So how did you get to that number? And while the client might not buy in to the 1.3 million, the logic behind it is important. You can sort of say, well, maybe I was too high in this number or too low in that number, but still the overall picture emerges. And maybe once you've left the meeting room, the client will go back to this slide and replace the numbers to the ones that he thinks are true, and will get to some numbers. So you taught the client how to think about the savings rather than giving point estimates of benefits that the client doesn't believe. Show some of the background, show some of the meat behind the numbers. This is probably the most important thing that you can do in any sort of sales presentation, is to rehearse. Rumor has it that Steve Jobs presents practices almost 3 full-time days when he has to do a major project release. And people say that Steve Jobs is a great presenter. He probably is. But I think you are all also great presenters if you invest 3 full-time days in rehearsing that 45-minute presentation. Things will be very high quality after that. Timing is incredibly important. People like to stick within the certain timelines in a certain time that people have budgeted for it. So don't run over. And then the worst situation would be that you actually set up the story of your presentation in such a way that the punchline of your presentations gets delivered at the end. You might actually not get to that. So 2 lessons here is to stick to the time and make sure that all the important messages get said early on in the presentation, so that they don't get left out at the end. Some other resources to learn from about the presentation design. This probably will be the classic book, Presentation Zen by Edgar Reynolds. So the advocate of slides with huge images and very little text. I would get the print version, not the Kindle version, to be able to see the images in the photographs that Edgar has been using. Another good book that I recommend is this book, Brain Rules by John Medina. It was some of the signs of the brain and how we remember things and how we get excited about things. Very interesting reading. As we have come to the end of this half-hour presentation, it's important to realize which slides of your presentation will actually stay on longest on the overhead projector. And most of the time, rather than calling your Q&A slides Q&A, maybe it's a good idea to bring back one of the visuals that you've used during the presentation and have that sort of burn on people's eyes while you sort of take the questions of your presentation. So that having said, I'm sort of moving to my sort of final slide here. And Melissa, maybe you've sort of kept track of questions or other things that people would like to discuss. I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah, actually, at this point, we haven't had any questions yet. I think you're great at explaining everything. I want to thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed this as much as I did. And everyone, feel free, above the avatars or the icons on your left, there is a link. It says View Room Chat. If you click on that link, you'll be able to enter any questions that you might have for Jan in the meeting chat box. Okay, we have, you use a lot of black background slides with white font. David Ogilvy says never do that in his book. Do you recommend it?
The presentation that I used here is is designed to give for very large audiences. So when I design a presentation for a big keynote audience, I would go with a black background and white characters, because a white background might simply overshadow you on the podium. There's a massive amount of light behind you, and people actually don't see you. For smaller settings, actually I would go for a white background, because it allows you to use a deck in multiple occasions. It might be easier to print out if people want to print out it. It might be maybe easier visible on a laptop in a one-on-one occasion. It's just easier to design. So small groups, white background, big keynotes, black backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
And also the slide designs that I used in this presentation, there's all the pictures and the paintings inside, work great for my purpose here to get my ideas across. Obviously, I'm not saying that sales presentations in general should have this specific format. Sometimes your slide, the theme or the paintings might be different, but also your slide might have to contain more information if you want to explain what your technical architecture is. A few lines and a few words are not enough, and you actually need to make use of some more dense presentation.
Okay, great. The next question was, how do you deal with mandatory logos and banners from your company standard? So sort of the template deck you might be given.
To creatively walk around it, I think first of all, try to get away with my approach. I'll stick the logo on the bottom right, maybe make it a bit smaller, and use the color throughout the template to make your presentation look good. If that doesn't work, or that doesn't get approved by the corporate communication department, you almost start treating the slide template as a frame. So I'll take this, whatever sits around it as a given. I'll just work inside my template and create my own environment. This is obviously less optimal. The best would be if you could actually change the template a little bit and situate it still recognizable as a company presentation that without all the cluttering and stuff around it. But it's a difficult one.
Mm-hmm. We have another question regarding using such visual images. Do you recommend a second version that has more text for a leave behind, or if you're sending it in advance?
It's different though. Like ultimately, ideally, yes, you would have a presentation that you use in a stand-up setting and one that you can email around. But it's problematic to do that in practice to maintain two versions of a deck. So you go some sort of a hybrid. So in a sales meeting, when you maybe have to depict the pain or the problem that you're trying to solve, maybe that section of your presentation uses large images and big visuals to get people to communicate a feeling or to the problem. While some of the more practical details, or here's our implementation timeline, or this is how our pricing works, you actually go with a slide that will be too detailed to put up in front of a larger audience. And sort of, I think, try to find a way in the middle that works. If you have the luxury and the time to maintain two versions of the same deck, it's great, but I don't think in practice that it will work.
Yeah. So the next question comes from Pio, and he asks, how much time do you plan for building a presentation from the moment you decide to take part in the pitch to the final version? Is it a week, a month? What number of working hours?
So the physical amount of working hour would be maybe a few days of work. So the designing slide doesn't take that much time, but I spread things out about 2-3 weeks time to make sure that I get to the idea. So I start working on it, put it aside, come back to it. So in the beginning, it's a way to sort of solve the problem. If you have to make a presentation at gunpoint, the last sort of 2 days before the deadline, the result will for sure be bad, because when the brain is under stress, it's not very creative. It's just in the mode of killing fires rather than coming up with great creative things.
Great. Wilson asked, what mind mapping application do you recommend? Do you have any others that would help a presenter?
Another one is DropMind, which has a desktop application and an iPad application. You can sync the two together. So iThoughts HD is good. DropMind is another one that I know of. There are other ones, but these are the two I can recommend. I work with myself.
Great. Then we have our next question. Where can you find pictures that are consistent in color and atmosphere, like the impressionistic pictures? iStock photo is business cliches. Flickr photos are too varied.
Yeah, so that is where your skill, I think, comes in. So you need to actually think yourself of a sort of theme you want to have, and actually these software are not very good to do this. To really decide, I'm going to use black and white 50s vintage images, or I'm going to have this theme, and you actually have to do it. The color, you can search in iStock photos for certain colors, so that will be one variant. But that is a problem. And in iStock photos, there are good images. You just need to look for them. There's no sort of settings of give me these styles. Interestingly, in the good old days of Microsoft, in sort of clip art in Microsoft, it allowed you to select things in style. Now, I hate clip art; I would not advocate it, but it had a search feature to find clip art in single style. Unfortunately, we don't have it yet in search technology of images, but maybe it will come. Someone writes a clever search algorithm.
Mm-hmm. We actually have another recommendation from another participant that says he uses Google image searching by uploading an image and then finding color-alike pictures through Google image search.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a...
Google image search is an interesting way to get inspiration. So you don't find an image, you can try it in Google image search. The images that come back are of poor quality and have copyright issues, but you have let's say 50 images in your screen, and it might just create an idea of the sort of image you might want to look for in higher quality databases.
So I think we have two last questions here. Do you have any tips for groups working on a presentation? It's fairly easy to stick to the story flow if you're working on a solo presentation, but when you're working with 2 to 3 people on a team, it tends to end up as a Frankenstein's deck. Any recommendations?
Yeah, it's hard. I think in the beginning it will be mind mapping of literally like the shuffling of yellow stickies on the wall to get some agreement. And at some stage, I think you need to sort of let go and stick to a certain flow, a certain structure. I find that in McKinsey, we had this a lot when teams try to work together on a storyline collaboratively. People tend to spend a lot of time on how to formulate a phrase, the first page, or how to make exact story right. And I think people put too much energy into it. I think in the end, you stick to a flow and then make sure that the content of the presentation, the real substance is nice, and how whether you first talk about the market environment and then about the competition or vice versa. You debate it, you talk about it, and I think then you just decide and get on this thing. So a pragmatic solution.
Okay, great. I think, well, our last question you sort of touched on already about preparing. If you have to send a deck to the client before the pitch meeting, should you prepare 2 different decks? Which I think you suggested ideally that would be great.
Yeah, so I said the purpose of different formats. What you could do is actually send maybe a selection of slides, not the whole deck, so it's a summary. Or sometimes in the extreme case, you could actually apply a technique where you also add subtitles, also boxes, small print, black boxes, maybe white font at the bottom of the slide that explain some of the concepts. Obviously, this is a bit of work to do, but it allows you to email a large audience deck ahead. It's sort of giving a narrative at the bottom of the slide. So
in that instance, would a couple of bullet points make sense?
So or actually just write it out in text. So at the bottom, either the bullet point is sort of sitting in between text and visuals. I would just go for the narrative almost. If you want to add text to a slide, you just write it out as a story, as if you were telling someone else's story in sentences.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that wraps it up. We're a little bit past 3:45. You want to keep everybody on time. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out a link to this presentation later this afternoon. And look out on our website for the video to be posted. Thanks so much, Jan, and thanks everybody for participating.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Sales Crunch. Learn more, earn more.